The marble floors of the Ikoyi mansion gleamed under crystal chandeliers. But Adedayo Okafor saw only the cold reflection of his wheelchair wheels as they rolled across the pristine surface. 6 months ago, he had walked these halls as Lagos's most celebrated architect, his firm designing the city's most prestigious towers. Now he was a prisoner in his own palace. Must you wheel yourself around like that? Ronke's voice cut through the morning silence, sharp as broken glass. She stood at the top of the spiral staircase he had designed himself, resplendent in a silk negligee that cost more than most people's monthly salary. The sound is giving me a headache. Adedayo's jaw tightened. The woman he had married 5 years ago, the stunning fashion designer who had charmed Lagos's elite, now looked at him with undisguised contempt. The sight collapse that had crushed his spine had also crushed something in her, though Adedayo was beginning to suspect that something had never truly existed. "I'm sorry," he murmured, hating himself for the apology. But peace was easier than confrontation, especially when confrontation meant enduring Ronke's particular brand of cruelty. "The new maid arrives today," Ronke announced, descending the stairs with practiced grace. "Try not to scare her away with your condition. Good help is hard to find." She swept past him toward the kitchen, her perfume, once intoxicating, now suffocating, trailing behind her. Adedayo wheeled himself to the window overlooking their carefully manicured garden. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had designed this house to be a sanctuary, every line and angle crafted for beauty and function. Now it felt like a tomb. The doorbell chimed at precisely 10 o'clock. Through the intercom, a soft voice spoke. "Good morning. I am Amaka Okonkwo. I am here about the housekeeping position." Ronke answered the door while Adedayo lingered in the shadows of the living room. The woman who entered was nothing like their previous help, no flashy jewelry or confident swagger. She was small, perhaps 25, with gentle eyes that seemed to absorb everything while revealing nothing. Her simple dress was clean but clearly second-hand, her shoes polished despite their age. "You'll address me as Mrs. Okafor," Ronke began without preamble. "The house is to be kept spotless at all times. I entertain frequently and I expect perfection. My husband," she gestured dismissively toward Adedayo, "requires minimal attention. Just ensure he's fed and comfortable. Your salary is 15,000 naira monthly, paid at month's end." "Questions?" Amaka's eyes found Adedayo's briefly. Something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or simply human acknowledgement. "No questions, ma'am. Thank you for this opportunity. Your room is in the servants' quarters behind the kitchen. Settle in quickly. We have guests tonight, and I want everything perfect." As Ronke disappeared upstairs, Amaka approached Adedayo. Up close, he could see the intelligence in her dark eyes, the careful way she carried herself. "Good morning, sir. I am Amaka." "Adedayo," he replied, surprised by the steadiness of her gaze. Most people either stared at the wheelchair with pity or avoided looking at him entirely. Amaka did neither. "I will take good care of your home," she said simply, then moved toward the kitchen. That evening, as Ronke's friends filled the house with laughter and champagne, Adedayo remained hidden in his study. Through the crack under his door, he could hear their voices discussing everything from fashion to politics, never once mentioning the man who had built the very roof over their heads. Near midnight, a gentle knock interrupted his brooding. "Sir, I brought you some food." Amaka entered carrying a tray. Not the leftovers he expected, but a carefully prepared plate of jollof rice, grilled fish, and plantains. She had even included his favorite palm wine, somehow intuiting his preference despite only knowing him for 12 hours. "You didn't eat at dinner," she observed, setting the tray on his desk. "I don't eat with them anymore." The admission felt like failure. Amaka nodded without judgment. "Food tastes better in good company anyway." She turned to leave, then paused. "Your garden is beautiful. The way the moonlight hits the fountain. It must have taken great vision to design." Heat rose in Adedayo's chest. Not embarrassment, but something he hadn't felt in months. Pride. Someone had noticed his work. seen beyond the wheelchair to the man who had created beauty. "Thank you," he whispered. But she was already gone, leaving him with warm food and the first genuine smile he'd worn since the accident. As Adedayo ate, he found himself wondering about the quiet woman who had entered their home like a breath of fresh air in a suffocating room. There was more to Amaka than met the eye. He was certain of it, and for the first time in months, he felt curious about tomorrow. 3 weeks passed like pages turning in a book Adedayo had forgotten he wanted to read. Amaka moved through their home like water, fluid, essential, noticed only when absent. She learned his routines without being told, appeared with tea when the Lagos heat grew oppressive, and somehow always managed to be elsewhere when Ronke's temper flared. But it was the small rebellions that began to resurrect Adedayo's spirit. A book left casually on his bedside table. Things Fall Apart, with a bookmark precisely where he'd stopped reading months ago. His phone, previously confiscated by Ronke for his own good, mysteriously appeared charged and hidden beneath his pillow. The internet password, changed by Ronke to lock him out, whispered discreetly while she dusted his study. Phoenix Rising 2024. "How did you know?" he asked one evening as Amaka served him dinner in his study, away from Ronke's latest soiree. "Know what, sir?" "That I was dying in here. Slowly, deliberately." Amaka's hand stilled on the tray. "A house shows its secrets to those who clean it. Broken locks on bedroom doors, bruises hidden under makeup, pills counted and recounted." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Pain recognizes pain. That night, after the guests departed and Ronke stumbled upstairs with her young friend, a club promoter named Kemi, who wore gold chains and called himself an entrepreneur, Adedayo found himself wheeling toward the kitchen for water. Soft humming drifted from Amaka's small room behind the pantry. The melody stopped his heart, his mother's lullaby, the one she'd sung during Lagos's violent thunderstorms, her voice drowning out the rain's fury. No one knew that song. His mother had been dead 15 years. "Where did you learn that?" he called through her door. Silence. Then footsteps. Amaka appeared in the doorway, wearing a simple nightgown, her hair freed from its usual neat bun. "My grandmother taught me." She said it was for broken hearts. "Your grandmother knew my mother?" The pieces didn't fit, but Adedayo felt truth in the melody's familiarity. Amaka's smile was sad and knowing. "Hearts break the same way everywhere, sir. They heal the same way too." She started to close the door, but Adedayo's voice stopped her. "Don't, please, I haven't heard that song since—" He couldn't finish. Amaka stepped into the hallway, sitting on a kitchen stool so they were eye level. In the dim light, she looked younger, more vulnerable. "Would you like me to finish it?" He nodded, not trusting his voice. Her voice rose and fell like gentle waves, washing over wounds he'd thought permanently scarred. When she finished, they sat in comfortable silence until upstairs, laughter reminded them of their separate worlds. "Good night." "Adedayo," she whispered, the first time she'd used his name. "Good night, Amaka." The next morning brought chaos. Ronke discovered Kemi in her bed had stolen her jewelry while she slept, vanishing with 3 million naira worth of gold and diamonds. Her screams could be heard 3 houses away. "This is your fault," she raged at Adedayo, who sat calmly eating breakfast. "If you were still a man, if you could still satisfy me, I wouldn't need—" The slap echoed through the kitchen. But it wasn't Ronke's hand that had moved. It was Amaka's. Time stopped. Ronke stared in shock at the maid who had dared touch her. Adedayo's heart hammered against his ribs. "No one speaks to him that way," Amaka said, her voice deadly quiet. "No one." Ronke's shock transformed into rage. "How dare you? You're nothing. A village girl playing in a real woman's house." "Maybe," Amaka replied, never breaking eye contact. "But at least I know what loyalty means." That evening, after Ronke had locked herself away with a bottle of wine and her wounded pride, Amaka helped Adedayo onto the garden terrace. The Lagos sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, the city's chaos muted by distance and elevation. "You didn't have to do that," Adedayo said as Amaka settled beside his wheelchair. "Yes, I did." Her voice carried steel beneath its softness. A man who builds beauty deserves to be treated beautifully. Their eyes met and held. The space between them thrummed with unspoken words, with recognition of something deeper than employer and employee, deeper than gratitude and kindness. When Amaka's hand brushed his while reaching for her water glass, neither pulled away. "What are you really doing here, Amaka?" Her smile was mysterious, tinged with secrets. "Learning that some things are worth fighting for." As night fell over Lagos, they remained on the terrace, two damaged souls discovering that healing could be a shared journey. Neither spoke of the growing warmth between them, but both felt the first sparks of something that could either save them or destroy everything they thought they knew about love. The explosion came 3 weeks later, on a humid Thursday morning when Lagos's heat made even the marble floors sweat. Adedayo had been dreaming more lately, not nightmares of falling concrete and crushing weight, but gentle dreams of Amaka's laughter, her hand steady on his shoulder as she helped him from wheelchair to bed. They had grown closer, sharing midnight conversations about books and dreams, about the Nigeria they both loved despite its flaws. Nothing improper had passed between them, but the tenderness was undeniable. Ronke noticed everything. "You think I'm stupid?" Her voice cracked like a whip across the breakfast table. She stood in the doorway wearing a red dress that clung to her curves, but her beauty had taken on a predatory edge. "You think I don't see how you look at that village girl?" Adedayo set down his coffee cup carefully. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't lie to me." Ronke's voice rose to a shriek. "My own husband lusting after the help. Do you have any idea how pathetic you look?" Amaka appeared in the kitchen doorway, drawn by the commotion. Her face was carefully neutral, but Adedayo could see the concern in her eyes. "Perfect timing," Ronke snarled, advancing on the smaller woman. "Tell me, dear Amaka, has my crippled husband tried to touch you? Has he whispered sweet promises while I'm away? Mrs. Okafor, please," Amaka began. "Please what? Please pretend you haven't been poisoning him against me? Please ignore the way he looks at you like you're some kind of saint." Ronke's laughter was brittle, dangerous. "You're nothing but a gold-digging whore who saw an opportunity." The slap came without warning. Ronke's palm connected with Amaka's, cheek with a sound like breaking wood. The force of it sent the smaller woman stumbling backward. "Enough!" Adedayo's voice erupted from his chest with a power he'd forgotten he possessed. His wheelchair squealed as he propelled himself between the women. "Don't you ever lay a hand on her again." Ronke stared at him in shock. In all their years together, through all her cruelties, he had never raised his voice to her. Never challenged her. Never fought back. "You're defending her?" Ronke's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of hurricanes. "After everything I've sacrificed for you? After staying with you when any other woman would have left?" "Stayed?" Adedayo's laugh was harsh, broken. "You've done everything possible to make me feel like less than a man. You parade your lovers through our home, steal my money for your parties, lock me away when your friends visit. You haven't stayed, Ronke. You've just been too greedy to leave." The truth hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had been smoldering for months. Ronke's face cycled through expressions: shock, rage, calculation, and finally cold fury. "Get out," she said to Amaka, who stood with tears streaming down her reddened cheek. "Pack your things and get out of my house, now." Amaka looked at Adedayo, her eyes asking a question he couldn't answer. How could he protect her when he couldn't even protect himself? "Go," he whispered, hating himself for the cowardice. "Please, just go." That evening, Adedayo sat in his study staring at architectural plans he could no longer implement, listening to Ronke's laughter echoing from the living room where she entertained her friends. The house felt hollow without Amaka's gentle presence. Food appeared without warmth. His medications were placed with clinical efficiency by a new maid who barely spoke English. He had lost the first person in months to make him feel human. But Amaka hadn't simply vanished into Lagos's sprawling neighborhoods. She had gone to Ikeja, to a modest apartment where a woman 15 years older than Adedayo sat reviewing legal briefs. Folake Okafor Williams looked like her brother might have, had fate not broken his body and spirit. As one of Nigeria's most respected human rights lawyers, she had spent months searching for a way to help Adedayo without triggering Ronke's vindictive nature. "You recorded everything?" Folake asked, reviewing the files Amaka had compiled. "Yes, ma'am. The verbal abuse, the financial record showing her stealing from his accounts, the photos of his bruises after she accidentally knocked his wheelchair into walls." Amaka's voice was steady despite her tears. "She's been systematically destroying him." Folake's jaw tightened as she examined evidence of her brother's torment. Bank records showing unauthorized transfers to Ronke's personal accounts, recordings of threats and humiliation, medical records altered to hide signs of abuse. "And you're willing to testify?" "Yes, ma'am. He saved my life once, though he doesn't know it." Amaka's voice grew soft. 3 years ago, my brother died on one of his construction sites. The contractor cut corners, used substandard materials. When the scaffolding collapsed, your brother tried to stop construction, tried to investigate. The contractor had him silenced, but your brother kept pushing until the truth came out. My brother's death meant something because Adedayo Okafor refused to let it be covered up. Folake stared at the young woman who had risked everything to save a man she barely knew. "That's why you took this job." "I came to repay a debt. I stayed because he's worth saving." The next morning, Folake Okafor Williams stood at the gates of her brother's mansion, flanked by 2 police officers and an Economic and Financial Crimes Commission investigator. Justice, she had learned, sometimes, required an earthquake to shake loose the truth. The shattered mask was about to fall away completely. The house was a mausoleum of silence. Ronke was gone, arrested, charged, and awaiting trial for domestic abuse, financial fraud, and embezzlement. The media had devoured the story. Architect's wife steals millions while abusing disabled husband. Lago society, which had once celebrated their glamorous marriage, now whispered about the scandal behind manicured hands at polo club brunches. Adedayo sat in his wheelchair in the center of the living room, surrounded by the debris of his former life. Ronke's expensive art had been seized as evidence. Her designer furniture purchased with his stolen money bore police tags. The house that had been his prison now felt like a tomb. "Aid?" Folake's voice echoed from the foyer. His sister visited, daily now, her lawyer's composure barely concealing her guilt. "I brought someone to see you." Amaka stepped into the room like sunlight after months of storms. She wore a simple blue dress and carried a small bag, her eyes cautious but determined. "I asked her to stay," Folake explained. "Just until you're stronger, until you decide what comes next." Adedayo couldn't meet Amaka's eyes. Shame burned in his chest, not for his disability but for his weakness, for allowing Ronke to destroy him so completely that someone else had to save him, for being unable to protect the one person who had shown him kindness. "I don't need saving," he muttered. "No," Amaka said softly, setting her bag by the door, "but you need healing, and healing is different." The first week passed in careful politeness. Amaka prepared his meals and maintained the house, but the easy intimacy they had shared before was gone, replaced by professional courtesy that hurt more than Ronke's cruelest words. Adedayo spent his days staring at architectural journals he couldn't concentrate on, watching Lagos life unfold beyond his windows like a movie he was no longer part of. "You're disappearing," Folake observed during one of her visits, "even more than when Ronke was here. Maybe that's easier. For who? You, or the people who love you?" That night, Adedayo found himself wheeling toward Amaka's room. He paused outside, her door, listening to soft rustling within. When he knocked, the sound stopped. "Amaka, can we talk?" The door opened. She wore a faded nightgown and had been reading by lamplight, one of his architecture books he noticed with surprise. "I was trying to understand," she said, following his gaze to the book. "How someone creates beauty from nothing. How you knew exactly where to place windows so the morning light would make the marble floors look like water." They moved to the kitchen, to the small table where they had shared their first real conversation. The night was humid and still, Lagos held in suspension between seasons. "Why did you really come here?" Adedayo asked. "Foleke told me about your brother, about the construction site. But that was 3 years ago. Why now?" Amaka was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "Because I was dying too. After Chidi died, after the trial, after watching everyone who could have helped him choose money over justice, I stopped believing good people existed. I was planning to end it." The words hit Adedayo like physical blows. "Amaka." But then, Folek found me, told me about her brother who needed help, who was trapped in his own home. She said you were a good man being destroyed by someone evil, and maybe if I helped you, I could find a reason to keep breathing. Her smile was watery but genuine. "Turns out saving someone else can save you too." They sat in silence, two broken people who had found each other in the ruins of their separate tragedies. "I'm scared," Adedayo admitted finally. "Not of the wheelchair, not of being alone. I'm scared that I'm too damaged to ever be worth loving." Amaka reached across the table, her fingers finding his. "You were worth loving when you had nothing, when you were trapped and hurting and couldn't even protect yourself. You think having your freedom back makes you worth less?" That night, for the first time since the accident, Adedayo cried. Not the bitter tears of self-pity he had shed in darkness, but cleansing tears of grief for all he had lost, and gratitude for what he had found. Amaka held his hand through it all. The healing came slowly, like dawn creeping across Lagos's skyline. Adedayo began sketching again, not grand buildings, but small details. The way light fell across Amaka's face when she read, the curve of her smile when she caught him watching her, the graceful arch of her neck when she hummed while cooking. She noticed his renewed interest in life and began pushing gently. Physical therapy sessions that had been abandoned during Ronke's reign were resumed. Old colleagues, driven away by his ex-wife's hostility, began visiting again. The house filled with laughter for the first time in years. But it was the evening she wheeled him into the garden that everything changed. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Lagos stretched endlessly before them, 10 million stories unfolding beneath the fading light. Amaka sat on the stone bench beside his wheelchair, her presence warm and steady. "I've been thinking," Adedayo said, his voice barely above a whisper, "about second chances, about starting over." "What kind of starting over?" He turned to face her, his heart hammering against his ribs. "The kind where I stop being afraid of wanting things, of wanting someone." Amaka's breath caught. "Adedayo, why did you stay?" The question that had haunted him for weeks, finally, escaped. "Not for Folake, not out of duty. Why did you really stay?" Her answer was barely audible. "Because you were the first man who saw my worth even when I wore rags. Because you treated me like I mattered when the world said I didn't. Because loving you felt like coming home." The kiss was tentative at first, a question asked and answered by lips that had forgotten how to trust tenderness. But it deepened as months of unspoken longing found expression, as two damaged souls recognized their perfect complement in each other. When they broke apart, both were crying. "I love you," Adedayo whispered against her forehead. "I know it's complicated, I know people will talk, I know—" "I love you too," Amaka interrupted. "Everything else is just noise." As Lagos settled into evening around them, they held each other in the garden of the house where both had learned that sometimes the most beautiful structures rise from the ashes of what came before. 1 year later, the morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the new office building in Victoria Island, illuminating the bronze plaque beside the entrance. "Ashes to marble architecture, building dreams, rebuilding lives." Adedayo stood, not in a wheelchair but upright with the support of a carved walking stick, surveying the workspace he had designed specifically for people society had forgotten. The accident had cost him the use of his legs for 8 months, but intensive therapy, surgery, and sheer determination had restored limited mobility. He would never run again, Would always need his walking stick or wheelchair for long distances, but he was standing. More importantly, he was building again. The Kano project proposals arrived this morning, Amaka said, entering his office with a stack of files and 2 cups of coffee. She wore a tailored business suit now, her role as creative director and partner officially recognized on the company letterhead. But to Adedayo, she was most beautiful in the early morning light, her hair loose around her shoulders, her smile the first thing he saw each day. "Any good candidates?" he asked, accepting the coffee and the brief kiss she pressed to his cheek. 3 excellent prospects. Mahmoud's background in sustainable design is impressive, and Sarah's experience with community housing projects could be exactly what we need. She paused at his desk, reviewing applications. All 3 are rebuilding their lives after prison. All 3 deserve a chance. Ashes to Marble had become more than an architecture firm. It was a movement. They hired ex-convicts, abuse survivors, people with disabilities, anyone society had written off as damaged goods. The work was challenging, sometimes heartbreaking, but it had given Adedayo a purpose beyond personal success. They were building more than structures. They were rebuilding human dignity. The Ikoyi housing project is ahead of schedule, Amaka continued, settling into the chair across from his desk. The first families should move in next month. Adedayo smiled, remembering the day 6 months ago when they had broken ground on affordable housing for domestic abuse survivors. Ronke's former friends had been scandalized when they learned their old party venue would become housing for those people. The irony had felt like justice. "Mrs. Okafor?" Their receptionist's voice came through the intercom. "Your sister is here for the lunch meeting." Folake entered wearing the broad smile that had become her trademark since her brother's resurrection. As head of the legal foundation that partnered with Ashes to Marble, she had found her own second chance in helping others rebuild their lives. "Ready for the big meeting?" she asked, embracing both Adedayo and Amaka. Today they were presenting their proposal to the Lagos state government for a revolutionary housing project, an entire community designed for accessibility, affordability, and sustainability. It represented everything they had learned about creating spaces where people could heal and thrive. "As ready as we'll ever be," Adedayo replied, checking his watch. "The presentation is at 3. We should—" His words were interrupted by a commotion from the reception area. Raised voices, the sound of expensive heels clicking rapidly across marble floors. Ronke appeared in the doorway like a storm-given human form. She had been released on bail 3 months ago, awaiting an appeal that everyone knew was doomed. Prison had changed her. The designer clothes were still immaculate, but her beauty had gained hard edges, her eyes carrying the desperate gleam of someone watching their world collapse. "Hello, husband," she said, her voice dripping with the old, familiar poison. "Lovely little office you've built here. Very charitable of you." Adedayo felt Amaka tense beside him, but he remained calm. Ronke could no longer hurt him. He had learned the difference between love and possession, between healing and enabling. "Ronke, you shouldn't be here." "Shouldn't I? I was your wife for 5 years. Don't I deserve to see how well you've done without me?" Her gaze moved to Amaka, filled with undisguised hatred. "I see you've made the maid a proper lady. How democratic of you." "That's enough," Folake said, stepping forward. "You're violating the restraining order." "Am I? How tragic." Ronke's laugh was sharp, brittle. "I came to congratulate you, Aid. On your recovery, your success, your upgrade in companionship. It's remarkable how quickly you replaced me." "I didn't replace you," Adedayo said quietly. "I found someone who actually loves me." The words hit their target. Ronke's mask slipped, revealing the desperate woman beneath. "Love? She's using you. Can't you see? First chance she gets, she'll leave you for someone who can walk properly, someone who what? Someone who treats people like possessions? Someone who steals and lies and destroys everything they touch?" Amaka's voice was steady, unafraid. "I chose Adedayo when he had nothing, when he was broken and afraid and convinced he was worthless. I chose him because of who he is, not what he could give me. Ronke stared at the woman who had replaced her, seeing perhaps for the first time the depth of devotion she had never understood, never been capable of offering. You'll regret this, she whispered, but the threat lacked conviction. The only thing I regret, Adedayo said, is not finding the courage to leave you sooner. Thank you for that lesson, even if you didn't mean to teach it. Security arrived to escort Ronke from the building. As she was led away, she looked back once, seeing the family she had never appreciated, the love she had never deserved, the life she had thrown away through cruelty and greed. The government presentation went flawlessly. The housing project was approved, funding secured, groundbreaking scheduled for the following month. That evening, Adedayo and Amaka stood on the terrace of their new home, smaller than the Ikoyi mansion, but filled with warmth instead of marble coldness. Any regrets? Amaka asked, leaning against his shoulder as they watched Lagos's lights twinkle in the distance. Only one, Adedayo replied, turning to face her. That I waited so long to do this properly. He lowered himself carefully to one knee, his walking stick providing balance as he pulled a simple diamond ring from his pocket. It wasn't the massive stone he had given Ronke, but it caught the light like captured starfire. Amaka Okonkwo, you saved my life in every way a person can be saved. You saw worth in me when I couldn't see it myself. You loved me at my lowest and celebrated my victories as if they were your own. Will you marry me? Through tears of joy, Amaka whispered yes. Their wedding 3 months later was everything their love story had been, simple, genuine, and built on a foundation that could weather any storm. Adedayo had regained enough strength to lift Amaka in his arms as they kissed, not perfectly steady but radiating happiness that made the assembled crowd cheer. Among the guests were their employees, former prisoners, abuse survivors, people society had discarded who had found new purpose in building homes for others who needed fresh starts. Folake served as maid of honor, tears streaming down her face as she watched her brother claim the happiness that had seemed impossible just 2 years before. As they danced their first dance as husband and wife, Amaka whispered in Adedayo's ear, "The song my grandmother taught me? It wasn't just for broken hearts, it was for hearts that were ready to be whole again." Later that night, in their honeymoon suite overlooking the Lagos Lagoon, they made love with the passion of people who had nearly lost everything and found each other instead. Their union was tender and fierce, grateful and joyous, the physical expression of souls that had recognized their perfect match. I used to think, Adedayo murmured against Amaka's skin as she traced patterns on his chest, that my life ended when that building fell. But it didn't end. It just paused, waiting for you. And I used to think, she replied, kissing the scars that marked his body's battle with survival, that I was too broken to deserve love. But you taught me that. Our cracks are where the light gets in. 5 years later, Ashes to Marble had become a model replicated across West Africa. Their housing projects provided homes for thousands of families. Their employment programs had helped hundreds of people rebuild their lives, and their love story had become legend. Not because it was perfect, but because it proved that sometimes the most beautiful things rise from the ashes of what came before. On the wall of their office hung a framed photo from their wedding day. 2 people who had been broken by life, choosing to heal together. Beneath it, an inscription in Igbo and English, "Ashes to marble, darkness to light, broken to whole." The past hadn't destroyed them. It had prepared them for each other. And in Lagos, where dreams were as likely to crumble as buildings in the Aoya, Rain, Adedayo, and Amaka had built something eternal. A love that could weather any storm. A partnership that strengthened under pressure. And a legacy that would outlast marble and steel. The simple truth that every person deserves dignity, love, and the chance to rise again. Their story became the foundation upon which countless others would build their own second chances, proof that sometimes the greatest architecture is not buildings, but the careful construction of hope from the rubble of despair. In the end, they had built more than a life together. They had built redemption itself,